You're stuck in a conversation that drains you, the complaints, the pessimism, the constant drama. Every interaction leaves you exhausted, but walking away feels impossible. What if you didn't have to endure it? Stoicism teaches us that our power lies not in changing others, but in recognizing when their energy no longer serves us. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Today, we'll explore how to spot toxic negativity, use Stoic wisdom to assess what deserves your attention, and most importantly, when to step away with dignity. This isn't about giving up, it's about reclaiming your peace. Think about the last time something frustrated you, maybe a rude comment, a setback at work, or even bad traffic. The Stoics would argue that none of those things are inherently negative. What makes them feel unbearable is our own judgment. Epictetus put it simply, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's the core of the Stoic view. Negativity isn't in the event itself, but in the lens we choose to see it through. Take Seneca's warning about irrational fears. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. How much of what weighs you down is actually happening versus how much you're assuming will happen? The traffic jam isn't attacking you, your impatience is. The criticism isn't poisonous, your resistance to hearing it is. This is the dichotomy of control. External events are neutral, but your interpretations, those you own. So pause and ask yourself, where am I turning small annoyances into full-blown storms? Because in Stoicism, walking away isn't just about leaving a toxic situation, it's about reclaiming your power to see differently. Stoicism teaches us that not every battle is worth fighting, but how do we tell the difference? This is where Prosoche comes in, the ancient Stoic practice of focused attention. Think of it as a mental filter, a way to pause before reacting and ask, does this truly deserve my energy? The Stoics didn't just avoid negativity blindly. They trained themselves to recognize what was worth engaging with and what was better left untouched. Picture a toxic workplace where gossip and complaints swirl like a storm. You could dive into every drama, defending yourself or correcting others, but would that actually improve your peace or just drain you? Marcus Aurelius had a rule for this. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That simple question cuts through the noise. It's not about ignoring problems, but about refusing to let pettiness hijack your focus. So take a step back, look at the situations that frustrate you, not just at work, but in relationships, online, even in traffic. How many of them are truly worth your time? How many are just distractions dressed up as emergencies? Try this. Grab a notebook and jot down 3 moments this week where you poured energy into something that didn't serve you. Because the real power of Prosoche isn't just noticing negativity, it's learning to walk past it. There's a common misconception about Stoicism, that it teaches us to shut off our emotions, to become cold and indifferent. But that's not detachment, that's denial. True Stoic detachment is about observing your emotions without letting them hijack your actions. Imagine sitting in a crowded theater, watching a play unfold. The actors on stage shout, weep, rage, but you're in the audience. You see the drama, you feel its impact, but you don't leap onto the stage and start rewriting the script. That's the metaphor Epictetus used. Remember, you are an actor in a play, the length of which is determined by the playwright. You play your part, but you don't confuse it with the whole story. Now take social media, scrolling through a feed filled with outrage, hot takes, and viral controversies. It's easy to get swept up, to feel like every argument demands your reaction. But Stoic detachment asks, is this my role? Is this where I'm needed? You might notice the anger rising in your chest, but instead of immediately venting it online, you pause. You acknowledge the emotion without letting it dictate your next move. That's the difference between detachment and indifference. One gives you clarity, the other is just avoidance. Think about a time when stepping back helped you see a situation more objectively. Maybe it was during an argument where biting your tongue kept things from escalating, or a crisis where calm observation led to a better solution. Detachment isn't about not caring, it's about caring wisely. Because when you're no longer drowning in every passing emotion, you gain something far more valuable, the power to choose your response, not just react. So ask yourself, where in my life am I letting emotions write the script, and where could I use a little more of that audience's perspective? Here's the next segment of your script. Consider all the hours you've spent replaying an argument in your head or holding onto resentment long after the moment has passed. What if that energy could be reclaimed? Seneca saw this clearly. He wrote in his letters that life is long enough if you know how to use it. Yet most of us waste it chasing grievances that can't be fixed. The Stoics understood that clinging to negativity isn't just exhausting, it erodes our resilience over time. Think of it like carrying a heavy bucket while walking a long road. The longer you hold it, the more it slows you down, but here's the truth, you don't have to keep carrying it. Modern life magnifies this drain. A coworker's passive-aggressive remark lingers in your mind for days. A family conflict from years ago still tightens your chest when you recall it. Even small grudges, like someone cutting you off in traffic, can steal more mental space than they deserve. These aren't just fleeting annoyances, they're energy leaks, tiny fractures in your focus that add up until you're running on empty. The Stoic remedy. Measure the cost. Seneca advised, how much of your life has been taken from you by the wrongs of others? That question isn't about blaming them, it's about reclaiming your time. Try this tonight. Grab a notebook and list 3 situations where negativity still holds you captive. Maybe it's a friendship that's turned sour, a professional slight you can't shake, or even your own self-criticism on loop. For each one, ask, what does holding onto this truly cost me? Not in vague terms, but in real minutes, opportunities, or peace. Because Stoicism doesn't demand you ignore pain, it teaches you to audit it. The moment you see resentment as a tax on your attention, walking away isn't defeat, it's liberation. There comes a point when endurance stops being strength and starts becoming self-sabotage. The Stoics weren't masochists, they didn't believe in suffering for suffering's sake. Musonius Rufus put it bluntly, if you endure something painful by choice, you act nobly. If it's pointless, you're just a fool. That's the first sign it's time to walk away. When the struggle no longer serves a purpose, look for the patterns. Is the same conflict resurfacing in your relationship without resolution? Does every conversation with a certain friend leave you drained rather than inspired? In Stoic terms, repeated distress isn't just bad luck, it's feedback. Imagine a sailor ignoring a crack in their ship because they're too focused on rowing. The water keeps rising, but they tell themselves, I can handle it. Meanwhile, the ship sinks. That's what happens when we normalize toxicity. Then there's stagnation when effort stops yielding growth. Think of a career where you've mastered everything, but the environment stifles your values. Maybe integrity is compromised daily, or cynicism has become the workplace currency. Seneca warned that no wind favors the ship without direction. If you're staying just because leaving feels scary, ask yourself, am I anchored to fear or sailing toward something meaningful? And finally, violations of core principles. No philosophy, Stoic or otherwise, asks you to betray yourself. If a situation forces you to act against your ethics, whether it's tolerating dishonesty, enabling harm, or silencing your voice, that's not resilience. It's self-abandonment, so reflect for a moment. What red flags have you rationalized away? The job that dims your spirit, the friendship that demands your silence, the habit of putting others' comfort above your peace. Walking away isn't weakness when the cost is your dignity. Sometimes the bravest Stoic move isn't enduring, it's knowing when to fold the page and start a new chapter. Here's your next script segment. Picture this: you've poured months into a project, only for it to fall apart at the last moment. Your first instinct might be to rage against the unfairness, to replay every "if only" in your mind. But what if, instead of resisting, you simply acknowledged this is what happened? That's the heart of Stoic acceptance, not passive surrender, but clear-eyed recognition of reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Marcus Aurelius framed obstacles this way: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, acceptance isn't the end of progress, it's the raw material for it. This is where Amor Fati, love of fate, comes in. It's the Stoic art of embracing everything life hands you, not just the easy wins. Think of a blacksmith shaping steel. The hammer's blows aren't punishment, they're what forge strength. Your failed project, it could be the hammer stroke that teaches you resilience, creativity, or where to pivot next. Contrast this with resignation, which whispers, "It's hopeless, why try?" Acceptance, on the other hand, says, "This is here, now how do I work with it?" Consider the weight we carry when we fight reality. The colleague who takes credit for your idea, the sudden change in plans, even the rain on a day you hope to hike. Each becomes heavier when we spend energy denying it. But acceptance, that's setting down the weight. It's saying, "This is the weather of my life right now," and then asking, do I reach for an umbrella or learn to dance in the rain? So here's a challenge for today. Pick one small frustration you've been resisting: a delayed flight, a critical comment, a goal that feels out of reach. Instead of arguing with it in your mind, practice this Stoic shift. This exists. What does it make possible? Because acceptance isn't about giving up, it's about tuning in. When you stop drowning in "this shouldn't be," you start seeing the path hidden in "this is." Here's your next segment. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges to self-respect. The Stoics knew this centuries ago. Epictetus said it plainly: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, you control who gets access to your attention. But here's where modern life twists things. We've been taught that saying no is rude, that setting limits is selfish. Stoicism flips that script. When you refuse to engage with a chronic complainer, when you mute a toxic social media feed, you're not being harsh, you're safeguarding your inner peace. Think of your mental space like a temple. You wouldn't let just anyone wander in, track mud on the floors, or shout obscenities at the altar. Yet how often do we let negativity barge in uninvited? A coworker dumps their frustrations on you daily. A relative guilt trips you for not meeting their demands. Even scrolling through comment sections can feel like leaving the door wide open for strangers to throw trash inside. The Stoic solution: guard the threshold. This isn't about cutting people off indiscriminately, it's about discernment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Sometimes the strongest boundary is simply refusing to mirror bad behavior. You don't have to confront every critic or fix every complainer. You can choose silence over shouting matches, distance over dysfunction. And digital boundaries, they're the modern Stoic's armor. That notification pinging at midnight, you don't owe it an immediate response. The algorithm feeding you outrage. You can swipe away. Seneca never faced a Twitter storm, but his advice still applies. We must give up many things to which we are addicted, considering them good. So pause and ask yourself, where have I been too permeable? Is it the friend who treats you like an emotional dumpster? The habit of over-apologizing for taking space? Boundaries aren't rejection, they're the ultimate act of self-regard. Because in Stoicism, respecting your own mind isn't selfish, it's sacred. Here's something we rarely admit. many of our frustrations come from trying to do the impossible, controlling what isn't ours to command. Seneca pictured this perfectly with his ship metaphor. You can adjust your sails and steer with care, but the waves will still rise as they please. No matter how skilled the sailor, the ocean doesn't obey. That's the heart of the illusion, believing we can dictate others' actions, opinions, or even life's unpredictability. Take family conflicts. You might replay conversations in your head, crafting the perfect argument to finally make them understand. But here's the truth no one tells you. Understanding isn't something you can force. Like the sailor fighting the tide, you exhaust yourself against currents you'll never tame. The Stoic shift: direct your energy where it actually counts, your own response. Consider how often we mistake concern for control. Worrying over a loved one's choices, obsessing about a colleague's inefficiency, or even trying to fix someone who hasn't asked for help. It all stems from the same lie: if I just try harder, they'll change. But as Seneca warned, we suffer more from imagination than reality. That anxiety, it's not about their actions, it's about your refusal to release the illusion that you could have or should have steered them differently. So pause here. What uncontrollables have you been gripping too tightly? The political rant that hijacks every holiday dinner, the friend who never takes your advice. List them, not to solve them, but to see them for what they are: waves in your ocean, not flaws in your sailing. Because the moment you stop confusing care with command, you reclaim something precious: the energy to navigate your own ship. Here's your next segment. History remembers Cotto the Younger not for the insults hurled at him, but for how little they seemed to touch him. When mocked in public, he'd listen calmly, not with forced patience, but with genuine indifference, as if the words were leaves blowing past in the wind. That is the essence of a Stoic exit, refusing to let pettiness dictate your departure. Today, we call this quiet quitting, but the concept is ancient. Whether it's stepping back from a friendship, resigning from a job, or disengaging from online debates, the principle remains: dignity isn't about grand gestures. It's about preserving your integrity while the world expects a reaction. Picture a colleague who undermines you in meetings, the immature response: a public showdown. The Stoic response: do your work impeccably, then leave on your terms. No fireworks, no wounds to lick later. Modern exits test this daily. Imagine turning in your resignation letter without listing grievances, or walking away from a family argument instead of escalating it. These aren't acts of weakness, they're demonstrations of sovereignty over your energy. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So ask yourself, where in your life is an exit overdue? Not a dramatic door slam, but an intentional step back. Maybe it's muting a toxic group chat without announcing it, or declining invitations to spaces that drain you. Stoic withdrawal isn't about vanishing, it's about valuing your peace too much to auction it off for attention. Because sometimes the strongest statement you can make isn't a loud no, but a silent, steady absence. Here's your next segment. Imagine clutching a burning coal in your fist, waiting for the other person to flinch. That's what resentment does. It scalds you while they walk away unaffected. Marcus Aurelius saw this clearly. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Every grudge we nurse, every bitter memory we replay, becomes another stone in the backpack we drag through life. And here's the painful truth: the weight isn't theirs, it's yours. Take a simple grudge. Maybe someone took credit for your idea years ago, and you still feel that familiar heat when you recall it. The Stoics would ask, who's actually suffering here? The person who wronged you likely forgot it by lunchtime. But you've carried it for months, maybe years, letting it shape your interactions, your trust, even your self-worth. That's the irony of resentment. It punishes the bearer, not the target. This isn't about excusing harm or forcing reconciliation. Stoic forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's the conscious choice to stop drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. Try this tonight. Close your eyes and picture that resentment as a physical object, a jagged rock, a rusted chain, whatever fits. Then imagine setting it down, not because what happened was okay, but because you deserve to walk lighter. So ask yourself, what's one grudge you've been mistaking for strength? What if letting go wasn't surrender, but the ultimate act of self-command? Because in the end, hatred hurts the hater most, and freedom begins when you stop waiting for an apology you may never receive. Here's your next segment. There's a fine line between commitment and stubbornness, one that even the most disciplined among us can cross without realizing it. Epictetus offered a simple but profound metaphor for this. The reed that bends with the wind doesn't break. Persistence is noble when it's purposeful, but how often do we confuse it with refusing to adapt, even when the evidence says otherwise? Take the story of a promising startup that burned through years of funding, insisting their original vision would eventually succeed long after market feedback suggested otherwise. The founders prided themselves on grit, but in reality, they were mistaking rigidity for resilience. Stoicism would call this a failure of pragmatism, the ability to separate ego from outcome. Marcus Aurelius warned against this trap. If the obstacle in your path cannot be moved, walk around it. Persisting against an immovable force isn't courage, it's wasted effort. This applies beyond business. Maybe you've stayed in a relationship hoping the other person would change, or clung to a goal long after it stopped aligning with your growth. The question isn't whether you can endure, it's whether you should. So pause and reflect. When has persistence blinded you? Where are you holding on not because it serves you, but because letting go feels like defeat? Sometimes the wisest Stoic move isn't pushing forward, it's bending like the reed, adjusting your course without losing your roots. Strength isn't just in standing firm, it's in knowing when to sway. Silence isn't emptiness, it's a deliberate pause, a space where wisdom grows instead of words. Seneca put it bluntly, we suffer more from chatter than from silence. Fools talk because they wish to speak. Wise men speak because they wish to say something. Think about the last time you got pulled into an online argument. The more you typed, the hotter your frustration burned, yet nothing was resolved. The Stoics saw silence not as surrender, but as sovereignty over your attention. Consider the modern battlefield of social media, where every opinion demands a reaction. You could spend hours crafting the perfect rebuttal to a stranger's inflammatory post, but ask yourself, will this exchange improve anything or just drain me? That's the litmus test, as Seneca warned. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. Scattering your energy across trivial debates leaves little for what truly matters. This isn't about apathy, it's about reserving your voice for moments when it can actually resonate. Picture a heated family dinner where politics hijack the conversation. Instead of adding fuel, you choose stillness, not because you lack conviction, but because you recognize that silence often speaks louder than words. The Stoics called this strategic retreat, stepping back not out of fear, but to preserve clarity. So reflect for a moment, where in your life could silence act as a shield? Is it the group chat that spirals into negativity, the coworker who baits you into petty disputes, or even your own inner monologue fixating on others' judgments? Practice this today. Let one unnecessary argument pass without engagement. Notice the weight that lifts when you stop mistaking reaction for strength. Because sometimes the most powerful Stoic response isn't a clever retort, it's the quiet confidence of letting go. Here's your next segment. Ever heard the phrase, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with? The Stoics took this idea even deeper with sympatheia, the belief that all people are interconnected, like threads in a vast tapestry. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, visualized this with his famous circles of concern. Picture concentric rings radiating outward. At the center, you, then family, close friends, community, humanity. The goal wasn't to only care about those closest to you, but to consciously choose who occupies each ring based on shared values, not just proximity or habit. Now consider your own circles. That childhood friend who's stuck in perpetual negativity, do they still belong in your inner ring, or have you outgrown the bond? The coworker who gossips relentlessly, does their energy lift you or leak into your peace? Stoicism doesn't demand you cut people off ruthlessly, but it does ask, are these relationships reciprocal, or are you constantly pouring into cups that drain faster than they fill? Think of it like tending a garden. Some plants thrive together. Roses and lavender, for instance, protect each other from pests. Others, like walnut trees, release toxins that stunt nearby growth. Your social ecosystem works the same way. A friend who encourages your curiosity, that's a rose. The one who subtly mocks your ambitions, that's the walnut tree. So tonight, try this Stoic audit. List the 5 people you interact with most. Next to each name, write one word that captures the energy they bring into your life. Not their character, but how you feel after time with them. Inspired, drained, unchanged, because sympathia reminds us every connection ripples outward. The question isn't just who do I love, but who helps me become the person I aspire to be. Prune with care, but don't confuse loyalty with self-neglect. A garden grows healthiest when it's tended, not choked by weeds. Here's your next segment. There's a modern myth that if you're not busy, you're falling behind. We say yes to every invitation, every project, every trend, not because it aligns with our purpose, but because we're afraid of what we might miss. Seneca saw this 2,000 years ago in Rome. Life is long enough if you know how to use it, but many are haunted by a fear of missing out, so they chase after everything and grasp nothing. That's FOMO in its purest form, not just distraction, but dilution of your energy. Picture someone juggling 5 hobbies, 3 side hustles, and a calendar packed with events. On the surface, they look productive, but ask them what truly matters, and their answer might be drowned out by exhaustion. The Stoic antidote: discernment. It's not about doing less arbitrarily, but about doing what counts deeply and fully. Take social media as an example. Scrolling endlessly to stay in the loop doesn't enrich your life. It fractures your attention into 1,000 anxious pieces. Compare that to the person who logs off to master a skill, nurture a relationship, or simply sit with their thoughts. As Seneca wrote, it's not that we have too little time, but that we waste much of it. So here's the challenge. What commitments are you holding onto, not out of passion but fear? The networking event that drains you, the trend you're mimicking to fit in. Try this for 1 week. Say no to anything that doesn't align with your core values. Notice what fills the space, perhaps clarity, creativity, or the quiet confidence of knowing where you're headed. Because FOMO fades when you realize missing out on distractions isn't a loss, it's liberation. Here's your next script segment. Ancient Stoics practiced minimalism long before it became a modern trend, not because they couldn't afford more, but because they understood something profound. Every possession you cling to isn't just taking up space in your home, it's occupying real estate in your mind. Musonius Rufus put it starkly, the person who has many possessions isn't richer, they're just more burdened. Think about that for a moment. What if the clutter around you isn't just physical? What if it's quietly feeding the very negativity you're trying to escape? Modern research backs this up. Studies show that visual clutter triggers cortisol spikes. Your brain interprets it as unfinished work, a constant low-level stressor. That stack of unread books, the wardrobe bursting with clothes you never wear, they're not neutral. They whisper should and not enough in the background of your days. The Stoic solution: audit not just what you own, but why you own it. Does this object serve purpose or peace? If not, it's likely serving distraction instead. Now imagine your inbox, not just the physical one, but the digital chaos too. Subscriptions you never read, apps that drain your focus, even contacts who only bring drama. Each one is a tiny thread pulling at your attention. The Stoics didn't advocate poverty, they championed intentionality. As Seneca wrote, "It's not the person who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." So try this today. Walk through your space, your home, your phone, your calendar, and ask of each item or commitment, does this expand my clarity or deplete it? You might find that letting go of the excess isn't about loss at all. It's about uncovering the freedom to breathe, think, and focus on what truly nourishes you. Because sometimes the quickest path to peace isn't adding, it's subtracting. Change is never comfortable, but the Stoics argued that discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong, it's proof you're doing something real. Epictetus put it bluntly, difficulty shows what men are. When you walk away from what no longer serves you, a stagnant job, a toxic dynamic, even an outdated version of yourself, the friction you feel isn't failure. It's the muscle of resilience being forged. Take career shifts as an example. Imagine leaving a secure but unfulfilling role to pursue something uncertain. The sleepless nights, the second-guessing, those aren't obstacles to avoid. They're the necessary heat that tempers your resolve. Ancient Stoics viewed challenges like a blacksmith views fire. Without it, the metal stays soft and useless. As Seneca wrote, "Fortune beats down the weak but steals the strong." That pit in your stomach when you step into the unknown, that's not weakness, it's the signal that you're growing. Here's the paradox most miss: comfort is the quieter trap. Staying in a situation that technically works but slowly dulls your spirit is like sitting in a room where the oxygen is just enough to survive, but never thrive. Discomfort, on the other hand, is the price of admission to a richer life. Think of a caterpillar dissolving in its chrysalis. The process isn't pretty, but without that messy transformation, there's no wings. So ask yourself today, what if the unease you're avoiding is actually the doorway? Not every leap will feel like flying at first. Sometimes it's just a free fall before the wings unfold. The Stoics didn't promise ease, they promised something better, strength, and that only comes when we stop running from the fire and learn to walk through it. Let's talk about a quiet thief of peace, the kind of guilt that masquerades as duty. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who shouldered the weight of an empire, wrote this: "What's not good for the hive isn't good for the bee." At first glance, it sounds like a call to endless sacrifice, but look closer. A bee that exhausts itself to death can't serve the hive at all. Stoicism doesn't demand self-destruction in the name of service, it asks for wise contribution. Family obligations often blur this line. Maybe you've said yes to one too many requests from relatives, not out of genuine desire, but because that's what good daughters do, or real men handle everything. But here's the hard truth: duty isn't measured in how much you endure, but in how sustainably you can show up. Think of a well. If you keep drawing water without refilling it, eventually everyone goes thirsty. Consider the modern myths we confuse with duty. Answering every text immediately, absorbing a parent's anxiety about your life choices, or staying in a toxic dynamic because family sticks together. The Stoics would challenge this. Is your sacrifice actually helping or just enabling dysfunction? True duty requires discernment, knowing when your yes strengthens and when it silently erodes you. So pause and trace your resentments backward. That simmering frustration after visiting a certain relative, the exhaustion following yet another favor, these aren't just bad moods. They're signals, as Marcus reminded himself. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Where have you been overgiving, not from abundance, but from fear? Fear of disapproval, conflict, or not being enough. because here's the reframe Stoicism offers. The most responsible thing you can do for others is protect your capacity to care. A candle that burns at both ends doesn't light the room longer. It just leaves everyone in darkness sooner. Here's your next segment. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it, but most of us spend our days reacting to what's loudest, not what actually lasts." That co-worker's snide remark echoing in your mind, the social media spat you can't unsee, zoom out, and how much of this will even register 5 years from now? The Stoics practiced what they called the view from above, mentally stepping back to see their lives as if looking down from a mountaintop. Petty conflicts shrink to invisibility. What remains are the relationships nurtured, the character built, the time spent without frantic urgency. Think of it like this: you're holding a map so close to your face that all you see are smudged lines. Pull it away and suddenly you recognize roads, destinations, the actual terrain. That's what perspective does. The frustration that feels like a boulder today might barely be a pebble in the long arc of your story. Marcus Aurelius meditated on this nightly, asking himself, "Is this worth the price of my sanity? Try this tonight. List 3 things that rattled you this week, maybe a delayed flight, a misunderstanding with a friend, or criticism from someone whose opinion you don't even respect. Now ask, will any of these still sting in 5 years? Not theoretically, but viscerally, most won't. The goal isn't to dismiss your feelings, but to recognize which battles are blips and which are worth your limited energy. Because here's the paradox: the more you focus on what truly endures, your growth, your peace, the people who matter, the less space there is for what flickers and fades. Life's too precious to let temporary storms convince you they're the whole sky. Here's your next segment. There's a moment after letting go that feels like standing in an empty room. The dust has settled, the clutter is gone, and now what? Epictetus, born a slave and later one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, knew this space well. He taught that every situation has 2 handles, one by which you can carry it and one by which you can't. When something ends, a relationship, a job, even an old identity, you're holding that empty space. The question isn't why it's empty, but how you'll fill it. Take something as universal as a breakup. The immediate urge might be to numb the void, rebound relationships, late night scrolling, anything to avoid the quiet. But Stoic renewal asks something harder. What if you treated this emptiness like fertile soil instead of a wound? Post-breakup routines aren't just about distraction, they're about deliberate redirection. Swap the hour spent replaying texts for morning pages in a journal. Trade stalking an ex's social media for mastering a skill you've neglected. As Seneca wrote, new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. This applies far beyond romance. Maybe you've left a toxic workplace or finally quit a habit that drained you. That first week without the old pattern will feel disorienting because neural pathways are literally rewiring. The Stoics didn't see this discomfort as a setback but as proof of change. Like a sculptor staring at a fresh block of marble, you're not staring at nothing, you're facing potential. So ask yourself today, what's one small ritual that could anchor your renewal? It could be as simple as a 5-minute meditation on Epictetus' question each morning, what's in my control today? Or as tangible as repurposing the time you once wasted into something that nourishes you. Because in Stoicism, rebuilding isn't about replacing what was lost, it's about creating what wasn't possible before. Here's your next segment: morning sunlight through the window, a quiet cup of tea, and one simple question. What will I do with this day? That's where Stoic practice begins, not with grand gestures, but with deliberate moments of clarity. The ancient Stoics didn't wait for chaos to strike before preparing their minds. They built resilience daily, brick by brick. Marcus Aurelius set the tone each dawn with a reminder. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Start with morning reflection. Before the world floods in, ask yourself, what's one thing within my control today? It's not about scripting the day perfectly, but anchoring yourself in intention. Picture a CEO reviewing their schedule, except instead of meetings, you're auditing your mindset. Will you let trivial frustrations derail you, or will you choose where to direct your energy? Then there's journaling, the Stoics' mirror. Not just any writing, brutally honest, unfiltered self-dialogue. Seneca's letters reveal how he ended each day interrogating his own choices. Where did I stumble? Where did I act with courage? Try this tonight. Write down one moment you reacted poorly and how Stoic principles could have reshaped it. The goal isn't self-judgment, it's awareness. And premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining worst-case scenarios. Not to dwell on fear, but to disarm it. Visualize losing your job, a harsh rejection, even illness. Then ask, could I endure it? You'll often find the anticipation is worse than reality. Like a fire drill for the soul, this exercise strips dread of its power. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, pick one practice, say, a 5-minute morning reflection or a nightly journal entry. Notice how it shifts your reactions. Because Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about rewiring your relationship with them. So tell me in the comments, which tool will you test first, the dawn anchor, the evening mirror, or the mental fire drill? Small steps today build unshakable calm tomorrow. Think back to every moment you hesitated to walk away from a draining friendship, a dead-end job, or even your own self-limiting beliefs. What held you back? Often, it's the fear that leaving means failure. But Stoicism flips that narrative. True strength isn't just in enduring, but in knowing when endurance stops serving you. We've explored 3 pillars of Stoic release. First, discernment, using Prosoche to ask, does this deserve my energy? Like Marcus Aurelius auditing his daily tasks. Next, acceptance, not as passive surrender, but as clear-eyed recognition of reality. The way a sailor adjusts sails to unforgiving winds. And finally, courageous release, the willingness to step back from what drains you, not with resentment, but with the quiet dignity of Cotto, refusing to engage with petty insults. Epictetus gave us the ultimate lens for this. It's not what happens, but how you respond. That traffic jam, that unfair criticism, the relationship that ran its course, they don't define you. Your power lies in the space between event and reaction. Now it's your turn. Where have you practiced Stoic release, big or small? Maybe it was muting a toxic thread, leaving a job that stifled your growth, or finally forgiving an old hurt. Share your story below, because the bravest lessons often come from each other's journeys. Remember, walking away isn't retreat, it's reclaiming the helm.